On a cold morning in January 2023, a sound that no parent ever wants to hear echoed through the Roberts home, a frantic call for help. It came from Christopher Stockton, the man who had only moved in with Paula Roberts and her 22-month-old son, Charlie, just a week before. The words he spoke were simple: "Come on, mate. Wakey, wakey." But there was something strange about the way he said it. His voice, though panicked, lacked the urgency one might expect when a child's life is hanging by a thread. By the time paramedics arrived, it was clear that something was terribly wrong. Charlie lay lifeless, his little body cold and unresponsive. In Stockton's story, Charlie had choked on a biscuit. It seemed like a simple, tragic accident. But as the hours passed and the investigation unfolded, the truth would shock everyone. Charlie hadn't choked. He had been violently shaken, his small body bearing injuries so severe they were similar to what you'd expect from a car crash or a fall from several stories high. But how could this happen? Why would someone hurt a child so innocent, so defenseless? How could a man, who had just moved into the house, be capable of such cruelty? And why did Paula, Charlie's mother, stay with him despite the growing doubts? The investigation would soon reveal the truth, unraveling the twisted tale of betrayal, neglect, and a mother's heartbreaking mistake. Christopher was about to face the consequences of a crime that would tear apart not just a family, but an entire community. What Stockton thought was an easy lie would quickly be exposed, and what started as a simple story of an innocent accident would turn into a nightmare that no one could have ever imagined. When Stockton was first questioned, he was calm, almost too calm. His story didn't add up. He claimed to have tried to help Charlie, even inserting his fingers down the toddler's throat. But paramedics quickly noticed something. There was no sign of choking, only signs of severe trauma. Had Stockton been caught in his own lies? Or was there something darker at play here? Let's find out together. But very quickly, I need to hear from you. How important do you think it is for parents to trust their instincts when it comes to their children's safety, especially in relationships? Share your thoughts in the comment section below.
He literally crawled through the tunnel, stood up, coughed, put his arms out, sat him on my knee, and he coughed again. So I thought, obviously hobnobs are oats, I wonder if there's something lodged in his throat. So I turned him over onto his front and patted him on the back.
Is this while he's still on your knee? Or
he was, yeah, no, he was over my left knee.
Yeah.
I turned him over so he was sort of, his chest was on my left hand and I was patting him on the back with my right hand. Right. But he didn't improve. So at that point I turned him back over, and I put this finger, class it as, but I put that down his throat. Right. To see if I could feel anything lodged in his throat, if there was anything there that was irritating him or anything. I was literally a second, 2 seconds, and I couldn't feel anything.
Yeah.
I tried to turn it back over again, patted him on the back again. There was no improvement, so I immediately called 999.
Before we continue, take a second to hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And hey, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories reach. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Charlie Roberts had always been a fighter. Born 2 months early, he came into the world with a set of challenges that no child should ever face. His tiny body, weak from the moment of birth, was a testament to his will to survive. He spent weeks in the hospital, struggling to breathe, to eat, to grow stronger. But despite the odds stacked against him, Charlie was a happy, loving boy, full of smiles and giggles that made anyone who saw him forget the hardships he had been through. Still, his early arrival left Charlie with difficulties that most children his age didn't have to face. He had trouble with communication, often unable to express his needs or wants. His voice a soft whisper rather than the loud, confident babble of most toddlers. His mother, Paula Roberts, did her best to help him. She had an instinctive bond with her son, a deep, protective love that only mothers can feel. But Paula was also facing her own personal struggles. Her mental health, long a challenge, was something she didn't openly talk about. At times, it felt as if the weight of the world was pressing down on her. Depression, anxiety, and feelings of isolation were constant companions in her life. She wasn't perfect, but she tried. She loved Charlie with everything she had, doing her best to balance motherhood with the internal battles she faced. But in the quiet moments when Charlie slept and the house was still, Paula couldn't help but wonder if she was truly giving her son the stability and care he deserved. And that's when Christopher Stockton entered their lives. Stockton, a man with a seemingly normal exterior, came into Paula's life at a time when she felt vulnerable. She had been single for a while, and although she had her doubts, Stockton seemed like he could be the one to help her through. They started dating, and after a few weeks, he moved in with Paula and Charlie. At first, things seemed fine. Stockton was polite, caring even. He helped around the house, and Paula felt she could finally share the burden of raising Charlie with someone who could be a father figure. But things quickly began to shift. Stockton wasn't the perfect partner or stepfather he portrayed himself to be. He started staying up late, often until the early hours of the morning, glued to his Xbox, playing games. His work schedule was erratic. He was often sick, claiming he couldn't go into work. Paula didn't know the full extent of what was happening. She tried to ignore the nagging feeling in the back of her mind, the one that told her something wasn't quite right. After all, Stockton had no history of violence, no criminal record. He was just a man who seemed a little too fond of his video games, a little too eager to hide from reality. But the days went on, and Paula couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Stockton's behavior began to raise more and more questions. He was short-tempered at times, even with little Charlie, who was always so gentle, so trusting. Stockton would snap at the smallest things, and though Paula noticed, she often brushed it aside, thinking it was just stress or the strain of adjusting to a new family life. Still, there was something in Paula that couldn't fully trust him. Do you think it was okay for Paula to have allowed Stockton to move in with them? Please share your thoughts in the comment section. It was a conversation with her brother that made her finally take action. Paula confided in him, voicing her concerns about Stockton's behavior. Her brother listened carefully, but his warning was clear. You need to be careful, Paula. Trust your instincts. And so, Paula decided to act. She set up a hidden camera in Charlie's bedroom, just above his cot. She didn't know if her worries were justified, but she had to know. She had to be sure. For days, the camera remained unnoticed by Stockton. It quietly recorded every moment, every sound. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Stockton played his video games, watched TV, and went about his days as usual. But Paula couldn't shake the feeling that she had made the right choice. As the days went by, Stockton's behavior grew more erratic. He seemed tired, irritable, always on edge. He began to distance himself from Paula, spending more time alone in his room, sometimes not even acknowledging Charlie when the little boy tried to get his attention. Paula tried to ignore it. After all, life was hard enough. She was dealing with her own struggles, her mental health, the pressure of raising a child with special needs, and now, she had to worry about a man she had invited into their lives. She couldn't let the fear consume her, not when Charlie needed her to be strong. Then, the morning of January 2023 came. Charlie, as always, was playing with his toys, his little hands gripping the plastic blocks he loved so much. He smiled up at his mother, his face a picture of innocence. Paula kissed him on the forehead and told him she'd be back soon, that she was just going out for an eye test. Stockton was in the living room, his Xbox controller in hand, looking distracted. It was the last time Paula would see her son alive. She didn't know it then, but the day she left for her appointment would be the day that would change everything. While Paula was gone, Stockton was alone with Charlie. And in those moments, something snapped. Was it the lack of sleep from staying up late playing video games? The pressure of being in a new family? Or was it something more serious, something hidden beneath his seemingly calm exterior? No one would ever truly know. But when Paula returned, everything was different. Stockton was frantic, pacing, his face pale. Charlie, her baby, was gone, and the man she trusted was hiding the truth. If you were Paula, would you have trusted Stockton alone with Charlie, knowing what you know about him now? I want to hear your thoughts. Before Paula got back, Stockton already made a call to 999. When Stockton picked up the phone to call 999, the tension was thick. The words that left his mouth didn't match the desperation in his voice. Come on, mate, wakey wakey. Why hadn't he screamed for help? Why hadn't he been more frantic, more desperate? And when the paramedics arrived, why did Stockton remain so eerily calm? The truth was buried beneath the lies, and it would soon be uncovered. But would it be in time to save anyone? Would anyone believe Charlie's story? I need you to remember that Stockton had stayed up late the night before, his Xbox controller still in his hands hours after midnight, lost in the digital world. He was off work sick, but that didn't seem to slow him down. Instead, it gave him more time to be immersed in the game, to block out the reality of his life. The exhaustion from the late-night gaming session hung over him, but so did a bubbling frustration, a deep, simmering anger that had been slowly building up. At first, it seemed harmless. Paula was gone. Stockton was alone with Charlie. He didn't have to pretend, didn't have to play the role of the caring partner or stepfather. He could do whatever he wanted. But the exhaustion from staying up late, combined with the stress of adjusting to life in a new family, started to wear on him. Charlie, innocent and unaware, was the target of that growing frustration. The camera footage, though grainy, showed Stockton picking Charlie up from his cot. For a split second, Charlie's small hands reached out, instinctively, seeking comfort. But Stockton's response was far from comforting. He jerked the boy harshly from the bed, his grip tightening. The camera caught only a glimpse of what happened next, but it was enough to send shivers down anyone's spine. In an instant, Stockton's frustration turned to rage. He shook Charlie, his movements violent and unrestrained. It was as if the exhaustion, the isolation, and the stress of his own life had taken over, flooding his mind with an anger that could no longer be contained. Charlie, defenseless and vulnerable, was in his arms, helpless. His little body, fragile and small, could not withstand the force. Stockton's hands were rough, his grip unrelenting as he shook the toddler with a force that could only be described as monstrous. The sound of Charlie's head jerking back and forth was sickening. Stockton's anger, once subtle and hidden beneath his calm demeanor, now exploded in a shocking burst of violence. The force was so intense that the injuries Charlie sustained were catastrophic. His tiny brain suffered trauma, and the delicate bones in his skull were crushed under the force of Stockton's grip. Charlie's body, already weakened from his premature birth and struggles with communication, simply couldn't handle the brutality of the attack. The type of injuries Charlie sustained were the kind usually seen in severe car accidents or falls from great heights, forces far beyond what a little boy should ever experience. After the shaking stopped, Stockton stood frozen for a moment, looking down at the boy in his arms. Charlie's body, limp and unresponsive, seemed to lose all the life that had filled it only moments before. Stockton's chest rose and fell rapidly, but there was no sound of the boy crying, no movement. Nothing, just the stillness of the room, the calm that followed the storm of violence. Stockton's mind raced, and the terror set in. He knew, even then, that something had gone horribly wrong. But instead of calling for help immediately, he stood there, unsure of what to do. For a moment, he simply stared at Charlie. There was no panic, no immediate sense of urgency. It was almost as if he didn't understand the gravity of what he had just done. Then, the facade began to crack. He moved quickly to the phone, dialing 999. His voice on the call, though shaky, seemed almost mechanical, as if he was going through the motions. "Come on, mate," he said over and over, trying to rouse Charlie, who wasn't responding. It was clear from the very first moments of the call that something wasn't right. Stockton's words didn't match the panic one would expect in such a dire situation. The calmness in his voice, even as he tried to revive Charlie, raised questions that no one could answer at that point. Was he in shock? Or was he hiding something? The paramedics arrived within minutes, but it was too late. Charlie's injuries were too severe. His little body had suffered too much. Stockton's story of a simple choking accident was already beginning to fall apart. The paramedics noticed immediately that there was no sign of choking. There was, however, an unmistakable sign of something terrible, and that was violent trauma. As the emergency responders worked tirelessly to save Charlie, Stockton stood aside, watching. His face, pale and empty, seemed almost detached from the chaos unfolding around him. In those final moments, Charlie's life slipped away. Paula, unaware of the horror unfolding in her own home, was still at her appointment. She had no idea that the man she had trusted with her son was responsible for the unspeakable crime. She would return, expecting to find her son playing as he always did. Instead, she would face a reality that no mother should ever have to bear. Do you think Paula should have known earlier that Stockton was dangerous, considering the footage she had recorded? Let's go back a bit to the conversation Stockton had with the emergency unit when he called 999. The operator asked him, "Is he breathing?" Stockton responded, "No, he's not breathing. I think he choked on a biscuit." Choking on a biscuit. That was the explanation Stockton offered. A simple, tragic accident. A toddler choking on food. Something that could happen to any child. But as the paramedics were already on their way, doubts began to creep in. Something about Stockton's calmness didn't align with the situation. His words didn't match the urgency needed in such a life-threatening moment. Stockton's claims about the choking were simply too far-fetched. How could a toddler choke so severely and yet show no signs of food blockage in his airway? The injuries Charlie had sustained were not consistent with something as simple as choking. They were consistent with something far more brutal. Charlie had been violently shaken, his small body battered beyond what would be expected from a mere choking incident. The paramedics didn't have the answers yet, but their instincts were sharp. They quickly transported Charlie to the hospital, but there was little hope left. When they arrived, the doctors took one look at Charlie and began their work immediately. They were experienced professionals, accustomed to dealing with traumatic injuries, but what they saw in front of them was unlike anything they had expected. The way his body had been contorted, the severity of his head injuries, all pointed to violent trauma. Choking on a biscuit couldn't explain this. The doctors were immediately suspicious. Stockton's calmness raised red flags. Why wasn't he more emotional? Why wasn't he trying harder to explain what had happened? Why didn't he seem frantic to help the child? The truth, though still hidden, was beginning to surface. In that sterile hospital room, amidst the chaos of medical professionals trying to save Charlie's life, Stockton's story was already unraveling. Meanwhile, miles away, Paula Roberts was sitting in the waiting room for her eye test. The quiet of the doctor's office was a stark contrast to the horror unfolding back at home. She had no idea that her world was about to be shattered beyond recognition. The image of Charlie's smile, the memory of his laughter from just hours earlier, was all she could hold on to as she waited for her appointment. She felt a sense of calm, expecting a routine checkup. She had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. But when the call came, it shattered her. The phone rang in the waiting room, and as she picked it up, the voice on the other end was unrecognizable. "Mrs. Roberts, you need to come home. Something's happened to Charlie." The words hit her like a blow to the chest. Her heart stopped for a moment, and everything around her seemed to blur. She stood up quickly, the world suddenly spinning, her legs unsteady beneath her. She didn't know what to expect, but nothing could have prepared her for the scene that awaited her when she arrived home. The sight of her son, lying motionless in a hospital bed, surrounded by medical staff, was too much to bear. She couldn't comprehend it. Her mind couldn't process what had happened. As she stood there, not knowing how to react, one thought kept repeating in her mind. How could this happen? As Paula arrived at the hospital, she was met by detectives. They began to ask questions, their tone polite but firm. They were trying to piece together what had happened, but the details weren't adding up. Stockton's calm behavior, his odd explanation, and the clear signs of violence on Charlie's body raised their suspicions. Stockton was still at the hospital, but he was no longer seen as a concerned figure. The authorities had begun to look at him with growing suspicion. Was he truly just a man caught in a tragic accident? Or had he carefully crafted a lie to cover up the reality? The truth was coming closer with each passing hour, and the detectives weren't about to let the man they suspected slip away without answers. Would they have enough to charge him? Or would Stockton's calm demeanor convince them that his story was the truth? Detective Sarah Knight was the first to voice the growing suspicion. Her gut instinct told her that there was more to this than a choking incident. She had seen enough cases to know that the signs were often there, hidden in plain sight. Stockton's story doesn't add up, she said quietly to her partner, Detective Jack Morrow. Her voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of frustration. Charlie had had injuries so severe, they were likened to those of a car crash victim. How could a simple choking incident explain this? The words hung in the air, unanswered. A toddler with injuries like this, like he had been in a violent collision, was not the result of a simple accident. Something much serious was at play, and they needed to uncover the truth. As the investigation deepened, another crucial piece of evidence surfaced: Paula Roberts' spy camera. Paula, though deeply in love with Stockton, had harbored suspicions about him. She wasn't sure if it was just her anxiety or something more. But when Stockton moved in, Paula felt uneasy. She had a feeling that something was off, but she couldn't put her finger on it. So, she did what any protective mother might do. She set up a camera above Charlie's cot, hoping to get some peace of mind. When the detectives reviewed the footage, they saw exactly what they needed. The camera had captured Stockton's actions that morning, actions that painted a picture of a man who had gone too far. The footage didn't show an innocent mistake. It didn't show a man trying to save a child from choking. What it showed was something different. Stockton, visibly frustrated and exhausted, shaking the toddler with such force that Charlie's tiny body jolted violently against the cot. The footage was difficult to watch. Charlie's little head snapped back, his body limp, his arms flailing. The violent shaking was unmistakable. As the footage played out, Detective Knight's stomach turned. She couldn't help but feel a deep sense of anger. This is not a father figure protecting a child, she thought to herself. Stockton had moved in just a week before the incident. He was supposed to be the one to protect Charlie, to care for him while Paula was out. Instead, he had shattered the little boy's trust in the most horrific way imaginable. The camera footage was clear proof of Stockton's lies. The violence had been deliberate. The head injuries, the bruising, the signs of forceful trauma. None of these could be explained by a simple choking incident. The detectives were now certain. Stockton had murdered Charlie. Back at the hospital, Paula was devastated. She couldn't understand how her son had ended up in this condition. The truth was slowly sinking in, but the emotional toll was overwhelming. As she sat by Charlie's side, the realization that she had unknowingly allowed her son to be in harm's way hit her like a ton of bricks. Could she have done more to protect him? Could she have noticed the signs earlier? She couldn't help but think about the camera. Had she been right to install it? Would things have turned out differently if she had confronted Stockton sooner? The guilt gnawed at her, but in the back of her mind, she also knew that she had trusted the wrong person. Stockton had been living in their home, but he had never been the man he appeared to be. As the investigation progressed, Paula would have to face not only the trauma of losing her son, but also the bitter truth about the man she had allowed into their lives. She had been suspicious enough to set up a camera, yet she had ignored those suspicions, hoping that they were nothing more than anxiety. Now, as she watched her son fight for his life, the weight of that decision became unbearable. As the detectives moved closer to their conclusion, they continued to dig deeper into Stockton's past. What they found was shocking. Stockton had no criminal record, no history of violent behavior. But there was one glaring piece of evidence that had been overlooked until now. A neighbor had reported hearing strange noises from the house just days before Charlie's death. Thumping sounds, like something heavy being thrown against the walls. Was this just a coincidence? Or had Stockton been hiding his true nature from everyone, including Paula? The investigation was far from over, and the detectives were determined to uncover every last detail of Stockton's life. They needed to know, was Charlie's murder part of a pattern, or was this a one-time tragedy? And more importantly, would they be able to convict Stockton before he slipped through their fingers? Stockton was arrested and charged, and on the day he appeared in court, the courtroom was filled with tension as the trial unfolded. The air was thick with anticipation, every eye fixed on the lawyers, the judge, and the two key figures in the case, Stockton and Paula Roberts. The gallery was packed with onlookers, many of whom were hearing about the case for the first time. Some had followed the tragedy closely, while others came to witness the shocking events that had led to the death of little Charlie Roberts. The courtroom was silent as the prosecution began its case. Nicholas Lumley, the lead prosecutor, stood tall and steady. His voice rang with authority as he recounted the horrific events that led to Charlie's death. Lumley presented the evidence clearly, methodically, and with a sense of urgency. He described Stockton's actions in detail, recounting the severity of the injuries Charlie had sustained and the lies Stockton had told. Christopher Stockton claimed Charlie choked on a biscuit, but the injuries inflicted were consistent with those seen in car crash victims. These head injuries weren't the result of an accident, Lumley declared. He pointed out that Stockton's calm demeanor, both during the emergency call and after the incident, was far from the reaction one would expect from someone whose care had gone horribly wrong. This was no accident. This was a brutal, violent act by a man who lost control. Then came the camera footage, the crucial piece of evidence. The prosecutor showed the court the images of Stockton shaking Charlie, the toddler's tiny head jerking violently, and his body limp from the force. The room grew silent as the footage played. No one could deny the sheer brutality of what they saw. The defense, led by Jamie Hill, attempted to counter the prosecution's claims. Hill, a seasoned barrister, argued that Stockton had not intended to kill Charlie. He painted Stockton as a man who had snapped in a moment of frustration, arguing that the murder was not premeditated. This was an isolated incident, an unfortunate accident, Hill said. He acknowledged that Stockton's actions were violent, but insisted there was no intention to cause harm. There was no malice, no premeditation, just an unfortunate loss of control in a moment of anger, he argued. This defense sent a shockwave through the courtroom. Many in the gallery seemed stunned, as though they had hoped for an admission of guilt and remorse. But instead, Stockton's legal team tried to portray him as someone who had made a terrible mistake, not a cold-blooded murderer. Hill also focused on Stockton's lack of a criminal record and emphasized that he had no history of violence. He was a man with no prior convictions. He was someone struggling with his own issues, health problems, stress, exhaustion. Yes, he made a horrific mistake, but this was not murder in the first degree. In an unexpected move, the defense also turned the spotlight onto Paula Roberts. They brought up her mental health struggles, suggesting that her inability to recognize Stockton's growing instability played a part in the tragedy. Paula Roberts was the mother, the one who was supposed to protect Charlie, but she ignored the warning signs, signs that many mothers would have noticed. Hill's argument struck a nerve with the jury. While no one could deny Paula's own struggles with her mental health, the suggestion that she was partially to blame for Charlie's death seemed to shift the focus away from Stockton's actions. For a moment, Paula's tear-filled eyes looked away, her face a mixture of guilt and heartbreak. How could she have let this happen? How could she have let Stockton into her life and her son's life when things were so obviously wrong? After weeks of deliberation, the jury was ready to deliver its verdict. The room fell silent once again as the judge, Mr. Justice Goss, stood and called for attention. The jury has found Christopher Stockton guilty of murder and child cruelty, he announced. The words hung in the air, a moment of justice that seemed to echo in every corner of the room. Paula, who had been sitting silently beside her legal team, gasped. Tears immediately welled in her eyes as she absorbed the weight of the words. While Stockton had been convicted of the most heinous crime, she was not completely free of responsibility. Her role in allowing the situation to unfold had been brought to light, and it would not be easily forgotten. As Stockton was led from the courtroom, the judge addressed him directly. Christopher Stockton, you have taken the life of an innocent child. You were trusted with his care, and you betrayed that trust in the most horrific way. You will be sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 25 years. You will never be allowed to walk free again. The words were a somber reminder of the irreversible damage Stockton had caused. His expression was one of resignation, but there was no visible remorse. The weight of the sentence seemed to sit heavy on him, but it was the suffering of Charlie's family that was the real punishment. Paula's turn came next. She had pleaded guilty to child neglect, and though her actions had not directly caused Charlie's death, the court had found that she had failed to protect him when it mattered most. The judge's voice softened as he addressed her. Paula Roberts, you are a mother who failed to protect your child. While your own struggles with mental health are understood, you should have acted to protect Charlie. You will be sentenced to 4 years in prison. Her sobs filled the courtroom as the reality of the situation set in. For years, compared to the life sentence Stockton now faced, seemed small, but to Paula, it was another form of punishment. She would carry the weight of her failure for the rest of her life. As the court proceedings came to an end, the tragedy of Charlie's death lingered in the hearts of all who had witnessed it. A little boy, full of life and potential, was gone. And though Stockton and Paula had been sentenced, there was no sentence long enough to erase the pain they had caused. Outside the courtroom, Charlie's family spoke to the press, their grief still raw. His father, Barry Greenwell, fought back tears as he spoke. Charlie was a much-loved son and grandson. His death has left a void that can never be filled. No verdict will bring him back, but at least we can begin to heal now. For the detectives who had worked tirelessly to bring Stockton to justice, there was some relief, but no true closure. Justice had been served, but it would never bring back the little boy who had been taken so cruelly from this world. Detective Chris Barker, the lead investigator who had worked tirelessly to piece together the truth of what had happened to Charlie, stood solemnly before the cameras, his expression a mixture of sadness and resolve. He had been with this case from the start, watching as the investigation unraveled Stockton's lies and uncovered the shocking truth. But despite his professional duty, the emotional toll had not escaped him. Charlie Roberts was just a little boy, a boy who wanted to play, to be loved, and to grow up. He didn't deserve any of this. None of us can truly understand why something like this happens, but I can tell you one thing for sure: his death was not in vain. We've made sure that Stockton will face the consequences for what he did. But Charlie will always be remembered. His life mattered. Detective Barker paused, his voice growing quiet. We all wanted justice for him, and in the end, that's what we got. But the truth is, no amount of justice can bring back the innocence that was taken from him. His words hung in the air, a poignant reminder of the irreparable damage that violence, especially when directed at the most vulnerable, can cause. Justice had been served, but it could never undo the harm. Charlie Roberts, a boy who deserved nothing but the best, would never grow up. He would never get the chance to laugh, to play, or to live his life. And while Stockton's conviction was a victory, it was a hollow one. The consequences of his actions would follow him for the rest of his life, but the scars on Charlie's family would remain far longer. If you or someone you know is in an unsafe relationship, speak out. Protect the vulnerable. Share this story, because no child should ever face this fate. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing for more content that raises awareness and sheds light on the stories that matter. Together, we can make a difference. Don't forget to like and share this story. See you in my next video. Be safe out there.